Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Yeah, camera's running. I couldn't tell. Didn't have my glasses on. Anyway, I was going to talk to you guys tonight about some of the challenges and even obstacles you might encounter living off grid and in a very remote location, like I have been doing for 30 years now, whether it was in the Colorado wilderness or here in uh, off grid Hawaii in the jungle. And I wrote a bunch of things down that I thought were relevant points for some of you guys that might be thinking about heading off into the boonies. And for some of you that do, you'll probably agree with some of these points. And these are in no uh, order of importance. They're just some points that I wanted to make. So, um, one of the things when you're way off the beaten path and a long way from everything is access to health care. Of course, that's going to be right up there. Now, when I was a lot younger up in the mountains, I wasn't thinking like that. But now that it's 30 years later, you do need access to health care. At least I do. So, um, you know, you got to be thinking about that. And like here, access to health care means traveling a ways, even if you can get an appointment in town here, which I'm talking about. Hilo is my nearest point of relief, which is an hour's drive from where I'm located. And then for other specialties, and I don't even mean anything complicated as a specialty, but we have a very few providers out here. So a lot of times, depending what you need, you have to fly to Oahu for services. Like for me, just to get a dermatologist to check out my skin, which has issues from too much sun exposure over the years. It involves flying and an all day trip for hopefully about 15 minutes with a doctor. But so, that's something you have to consider. Now, when I was in the mountains, it was even much further. We did have a little local doctor who you could see for some things. And if you needed anything more complicated, it was at least an hour's drive down to uh, civilization to get some things taken care of. So you want to be thinking about that to some degree. The healthcare, the distance to amenities is really on the list as well. Um, when I was in the mountains, we would do major supply runs uh, every few months because the nearest point of relief for real good stocking up on food and stuff was an hour's drive away as well. And then, of course, it wasn't even accessible during the winter a lot of times. Now, here I don't have the problem with not being able to get out unless the roads are flooding, but then that's very temporary. But uh, in the mountains, you could get snowed in for a very, very long time. I'd been snowed in for, months before and had to hike out. But that was a whole different thing, and I was a lot younger, and it was a great adventure. So, I took that and was happy about it actually, but I wouldn't be as happy about that now at this age. I'm not wanting to do that. So, and then you're going to have to be relying on your own power and water. Um, and that's an issue. I mean, you've got to have, I guess you don't technically need to have power. I didn't when I first went into the wilderness, and it took me a while before I got to having power. Out here, I like having all the solar power that I've got because I like the comfort that it brings. Mostly, the number one thing that it does is it preserves food with the refrigeration. I don't need heating or cooling out here, so I'm really lucky. And then in the mountains, it was all about chopping enough wood to feed your wood stove through the winter. So Um, you have to be thinking about all of these type of things. So, um, yeah, communication and connectivity to the outside world. Again, when I first started my off-grid adventure, I went into the wilderness and I did not want any of that. And cell phones were just starting to be used a little bit, but I was so far deep in the woods that you could never get a cell signal out there. And, out here, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, cell coverage is hit and miss in certain places for sure. And so when you're heading off into the boonies, you want to be thinking about that as well. Uh, what do you want as far as communication, and how much isolation can you tolerate? I've gone months before without seeing a single human being. And if I added up all of my time off grid between both places, Colorado and here, I've gone years without seeing a single person because I've spent a lot of time in isolation. And, that can cause some problems too. So I knew some people that when they were up in the mountains, especially, they became very, very antisocial the longer they stayed isolated, and it was harder for them to deal with anything in society. I mean, they did go out there to get away from society, but um, so you want to be thinking about how much isolation can you take, and do you need to be thinking about going to a place that has, a community that you can tap into to, you know, at least hang out with some like-minded people now and then, or if that's not a concern. But um, off-grid, and especially the more remote you go, it's going to be something you need to think about. Of course, the weather challenges wherever you are, that's going to be an issue. In the mountains, get snowed in, so you want to be stocked up on all of your food, water. Um, and it's the same out here. I don't run in and out of town too much, make supply runs now and then, stay pretty well just tucked away in the jungle most of the time. And that's just how I like it. It's nice and quiet. And then, if you go really deep into the wilderness, I mean, you have to be thinking you could have some wildlife encounters. I have had those. Um, and then maintenance and upkeep of your place. Basically, you have to be self-reliant on everything that you do. You have to be taking care of business yourself. A lot of places, when you're really remote, it's very hard to find people to come out and do things if you can afford to have it hired. I never could in the beginning. I would just did everything myself. And now the older I get, I've had to be a little flexible. Like, for one example, I used to put all my solar panels on the roof out here. And every time a hurricane would start coming into the neighborhood here, and it looked like we were going to get a really good blow out of it, I'd get up there on the roof and take those solar panels down. And then when, it got out of the neighborhood, I'd go back up there and put them up because I didn't want my solar panels getting damaged and blown off the roof the few times that we were taking a pretty good pounding. And now, when I was younger, that didn't bother me so much. I just get up there and take them down and stack them up, and and then take them and put them back up after the storm. But now I don't like being up on the roof anymore. So that's why you see me. I put all my solar panels on the ground, and that's just a way of adapting to being 30 years older and not as sure-footed as I was when I was in my 30s. So, yeah, you want to have a little flexibility and adaptability. You, of course, want to have some emergency preparedness too. Because if you do have a natural disaster, for example, and you got injured out here or something, you're going to need some, at least some basic first aid supplies and knowledge to take care of yourself, because it would be a long time before, if you had communication and could communicate to the outside world, it's still going to be a while before you're going to get any real help to you. So that's, these are all things that you need to consider. These are the things that I've had to deal with over the years. Um, when I was in the mountains, I did not ever think that I was going to need medical services. It never even entered my mind. I was young and strong. And then I did one time. And of course, it was snowing and no one could get up to me. Um, you know, no ambulance could get up to where I was at. It was almost four-wheel drive to get into my cabin in the best of conditions, but with any snow, there was no one getting up in there. And I did have a cell phone by that point, but I had to call somebody and meet me about, they could only get about halfway up my road. And I had to walk out there in bad shape, in a snowstorm in about 2 feet of snow, to meet them at a point that they could get to. And then they took me to the local clinic. And, that was a big eye opener, because, I was pretty young still. So, and out here, it's kind of the same deal. I mean, if you have an emergency, help's not going to get here immediately. You've got to be self-reliant, if you can be, on as much as you possibly can. So, yeah, I just wanted to throw some of these ideas out there, because I know a lot of you are thinking about living off grid. It was always, I thought about it for years before I actually made the jump. And a lot of these things that I'm talking about, I didn't think them through. I was, just like I said, young and strong and very self-confident. Uh, but those things did happen. There were freak storms that snowed you in for great deals of time, snowed you out of your place. Like you go to work or something and a big storm comes in and you can't get home, and you're a long way from anything. I mean, that was a very remote existence, which I thoroughly loved. But anyway, it's my fireside chat of things to think about tonight without the fire. All right, guys. Aloha. Hope it gives you some things to think about.